All right. So we've got quite a bit of stuff going on in the news today. We've got Elon calling out politicians and pork barrel spending for the first time. I think he'd been pretty muted for a while, and now he's finally calling it out. We've got sales up in Australia, but down pretty much everywhere else. We've got all sorts of kind of conflicting signals. Markets are up hot today. Tesla kind of dumped into the close. So a lot of different stuff going on. Bradford, how you doing?
Doing good. Elon, he don't give a flyer today about what people think about his politics. His interview on Sunday was saying, "Well, I really can't say what I feel," but a couple days later, here we go.
Yeah, which it kind of makes sense. I mean, you had cutting the subsidies for EVs in that bill, which, Elon's actually said at the time they came in, is like, we don't really need the subsidies, but let's at least make it an even playing field and get rid of the subsidies for oil and gas also. But instead, after Elon spent all this time working to try to eliminate some unnecessary spending and make the government more efficient, they, in this very partisan way, cut EV spending, or cut the EV credit and cut a lot of the credits for green generation. So the investment tax credit and the production tax credit for wind and for batteries. So, it's just like cutting those out, having all this other kind of pork barrel spending, and then doing nothing with the oil and gas. He's like, guys, come on, like, what are we doing here? Like, clearly I'm on Team Trump, but what you're doing is not, like, I can't defend it anymore. So I think he finally got fed up with just the politicking of the politicians, and just realized that he had to call it out, or maybe didn't realize that he had to call it out, but just couldn't help himself, because it was, I mean, it's pretty egregious. I think most people, even in the Tesla community, wide variety of politics, but I think most people saw what was going on and are like, okay, not any serious attempt to balance the budget or even just reduce the deficits. Like, you're cutting generation credits and incentives, when, like, the electricity shortage is one of the most serious issues we have from an economic and from a national security perspective. Like, we think we need an all solutions kind of path forward on electricity generation, and instead we're just kind of de-incentivizing what has been one of the largest areas of electricity growth in the last 2 decades. So it's a pretty bad bill, and I'm honestly okay with Elon calling out how bad it's been.
So what? All right. So let's go to the quote. He says, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You did wrong. You know it."
You know it. Does that move the needle at all, or do they? I mean, nobody cares, and it just gets passed, and we'll have to grow our way out of the deficit. I mean, that seems like the path we're on.
Yeah, ultimately, I don't think we should ever forget that politicians lie constantly, and ultimately, most politicians, when they get in power, are toll keepers. So what that means is they have, various special interests that they cater to, and that's what you should expect. So I'm curious, what did they cut? Tax incentives for solar power production. What are some of the power production incentives that they cut?
Yeah, so the investment tax credit is the big one, and this was codified. I mean, it was law. It was one of the things when Trump came to the White House. People were like, "Oh, he might cut
The EV
like the
credit.
well, the solar and wind credit, the EV credit too." But my contention, and I think most people that I saw online were like, "Well, that would take an act of Congress to do. You can't just, like, executive order away
Mhm.
these credits, because they're enshrined in law." But Congress actually went ahead and is removing those credits. So I think it's not an immediate phase out. But these credits were supposed to be intact, I think, until 2033 or so.
Mhm.
I think they moved that up to 2028, if my memory is correct. And then they also introduced a new requirement that for a lot of these new projects, to get the credit up until 2028, they need to have, like, a shovel in the ground, essentially, within, it was either 30 or 60 days of the of the bill becoming law, which is, like,
Wow.
you just, like, that's gonna effectively make it like
But
untenable.
yeah, effectively, it's killed right now.
Yeah.
Unless you happen to get it started in the next month.
Yeah. So, I didn't follow exactly how this has been handled with the reconciliation
Mhm.
with the Senate bill, the Senate version of the bill. I am curious to see kind of how that has or is panning out. But it's pretty bad, to be honest with you, because I won't repeat myself, but I'm extremely disappointed.
Yeah. And there's a ton of tax credits out there for oil and gas. There's different accounting things that oil and gas firms can do that make things more attractive. I believe it's on the order of 30 to 50 billion a year. Um, so, there's tax credits that are given for oil and gas, but so people think that EVs are the only ones that receive tax credit, but oil and gas does to a substantial standpoint.
Yeah. So, I'm glad he's calling this out, but like honestly, I think just as a citizen, putting Elon and Tesla and like all that aside, um, we're kind of in this weird situation where, in order to avoid like a total decline of the empire kind of situation, like a la Rome or like all these different empires that have crumbled over time, it seems like really the only hope is like a massive increase in GDP growth, and really the only hope for that is like AI. So it's kind of like a like a legit Deus ex machina kind of moment where it's like, if somebody
Mhm.
was writing the plot of our civilization, it'd be like all hope was lost, and the burden of their debt was becoming untenable, and then all of a sudden, machine intelligence,
Mhm.
increased GDP and saved everything. Like it does feel a bit like kind of a ridiculous plot twist that at the one moment when everything seems to be crumbling
Mhm.
on the at least in terms of how sustainable this economic model is, it's like that this massive inflection point in GDP growth is hit at that exact same moment. um
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
almost like
simulation.
we need Gandalf to ride down the mountain with the heroes of Valhalla or whatever, to save the economy. I'm thinking though, when it comes to data centers, even if they lose the investment tax credit, they're still going to get whatever power they can,
You're saying
whether
data centers?
yeah,
Okay.
whether it's solar or nuclear or natural gas, they're going to get their hands on power however they can. Would you
Yeah,
agree
so
with that?
well, yes, but that you could, if there were fewer roadblocks, um, like for example, if the interconnect process was smoother, if the grid was a bit more if the investments in our grid that we need to be making on the transmission and distribution side were actually being made at scale and in a timely manner, then we could add a lot more generation a lot more quickly, and we could add a lot more data centers at a probably at a lower overall cost. But I think this situation that we're in is like, you're by removing the economics of the lowest cost generation, you're essentially um, reducing the amount of new generation that's going to be added to the grid. I gotta figure out where my camera is over here. You're reducing the amount of generation that would be added. So like maybe we would have been up here and instead like we're going to come down here because some projects aren't going to pencil anymore. At the same time, like every single estimate that I've seen, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think, is basically showing that between now and 2030, there's about 150 gigawatts of new load, meaning new demand, that's going to be added to the electricity grid. Um, there's like maybe 50 gigawatts that's going to be added from natural gas, and that's optimistically. Um, and a portion more that's going to be met through wind and solar. But like the problem with wind and solar is it's not firm. So
Mhm.
going back to the issues with the grid, like, okay, you still need to get that power where it needs to go. So I think what's going to happen is like the marginal, like I think power price volatility is going to increase very significantly, because your demand is increasing very significantly. Your supply is not going to be increasing at quite that same rate, and then the interconnect like process in general is just going to limit the how much firm power can be added in a quick period of time. So just projecting all this forward in my head without a sophisticated model, it just seems pretty clear that you're going to have rising prices of power, which is going to make the cost a lot higher for like all these AI inquiries that we're going to be doing and the training and everything else. And you could have lower cost of power, and therefore, it's like lower oil. Like when oil prices are low, that like benefits society in general. That to take the old industrial model, I think electricity is the new oil for this generation, and that we're artificially limiting its supply and getting it not investing in the processes that would allow it to be distributed as efficiently as possible. So that's going to just raise the cost, and that has me concerned.
Okay.
I'm not
for you. This may be a dumb
It's
question.
Sure.
So we have Tesla Lathrop making 40 gigawatt hours of megapacks per year now. That sounds like a lot. So what about, the 40 gigawatt hours coming online every year, just from Lathrop before the mega factory near Houston gets built?
So it does sound like a lot, I will admit. So 40 gigawatt hours coming online, and I talked about 100 gigawatt shortfall roughly. So like, doesn't that just fill the gap? No, because we're talking about capacity versus like power. So the 40 or let's just say the 150 gigawatts that I was talking about of new capacity, that would be new load, like kind of added to the grid. So if you think of like the peak demand of the US grid, it's about 1.3 terawatts. So we're talking about that going to 1.45 terawatts.
Okay.
The 40 gigawatt hours coming out of Lathrop, that's 40 gigawatts that you can like cycle once per day. And so it just doesn't make a very big blip, if that makes sense. So you're looking at like a kind of like max capacity versus what Lathrop's going to be adding, which is like very short kind of time duration window that you can use that. So I mean, maybe we could even say it another way, but let's imagine this 150 gigawatt hours that we're talking, or gigawatts that we're talking about, is like mostly base load, meaning it needs that power there 24/7. Your mega packs can maybe help smooth out 4 hours of that 150 gigawatts. Or actually, it's only a 40 gigawatts. So maybe over 5 years, you get to 120. But you're only smoothing out 4 hours of a customer that probably needs it round the clock. And then on top of that, it's not generation, like, and you lose some with efficiency anyways. So you need the generation plus the batteries or the transmission and distribution to kind of like help match the supply with the demand. And really, generation, I think, is becoming a choke point, which is something I hadn't really anticipated.
So we're getting some comments about the politics and Elon. Matt, I know you and I are more balanced. We're not like Uber bulls that apologize for everything that Elon does or says, or that Tesla, does or says or whatever. Is there a risk that Republicans start disliking Elon? So like that everybody on the political spectrum starts disliking Elon?
Maybe. I think what he said though is not like going scorched earth, like GFY Bob, the way that he did it a while. Like it's a pretty muted thing, and he's criticizing the actual spending. And I think from his seat, it was as much of his like political capital that he spent to try to make a difference on government efficiency, to see this, like, I think he's got some moral high ground. And I think what he said so far, at least, is not it's not crossing some sort of line. I do think, especially with like the Jared Isaacman nomination getting like pulled away, it does seem like there's a little bit of this, entrenched Republican interest that, is kind of like old Washington, the drain the swamp types. It seems to me like Trump has not completely drained the swamp. And so I think you've got a bit of that like those types, which are definitely going to be anti-Elon. But I don't know. My sense is the people that are a little bit more kind of Trump aligned in worldview are probably not going to be turning completely against Elon.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it was with Isaacman. I know Isaacman was close with SpaceX, had some commercial ties with them, at least in the past. He's been to space thanks to SpaceX. Like, I almost feel like the NASA administrator should be very familiar with SpaceX because they're launching a majority of payload to orbit, and a huge amount from the U.S., if not like 99% of the payload to orbit from the U.S. So I feel like you should have ties to NASA. Allegedly, is like Isaacman donated money to one of our favorites, the astronaut from Arizona, Mark Kelly or whatever.
Mark Kelly. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, we
But
got to
he's a
get past this
Democrat,
stuff.
so the
Like,
Republicans don't like that.
if that's actually the reason, that is just so absurd. Like, Mark Kelly, regardless of what you think of him, like, he said some stupid stuff, for sure. But like, he actually is a fellow astronaut and has done some pretty cool things. It seems like we're going a little bit back on this path of like, oh, if you did one thing one time that I disagree with, then we've got to cancel you. And I think the Republicans are starting to go down that path a little bit. And it's like, we got to just hit the hard brake on that, as far as I'm concerned. That is no way to run a government or a society. It's toxic.
All right, so we have some kind of Waymo broccoli thing that's in our queue. I wonder if we could pull that up. I'm curious what this is. Oh, it's Atlanta. Okay.
I was wondering what you were talking about. Waymo broccoli. I don't remember that. Yeah, so Waymo is going to be launching in Atlanta. This is the map that they released showing their service territory. So I guess the implied question is Tesla toast now that Waymo's launching in Atlanta?
I'm trying to make the shape. Am I doing it?
No, you need a much skinnier neck. You need to.
It's Tesla toast. Well, I do think it. I'll give Waymo props. They continue to expand. I'm guessing them expanding to Atlanta meant probably $50 to $100 million more in engineering time to get that all figured out or begin to figure that out. We still see problems with Waymo cars. Maybe it's anecdotal and we're just seeing the worst of it. But it seems like Waymo hasn't figured out autonomy. I know they're the one. I know they're doing a lot of miles and a lot of trips per week and all that. But you still see issues with the cars. Like there's, with all the sensors, they're supposed to see the road really well, but we just saw a video of a Waymo driving through like a huge stretch of flooded road where if you have all these expensive sensors, like why did it not prevent the Waymo from going through this?
Yeah, that wasn't a good look. But I'm almost willing to give Waymo the benefit of the doubt on their technology. I mean, like they've been operating safely. Does it do some stupid things? Like, yeah, there was the video last week, I think, of it like blasting over a pothole. It looked really bad. But like with a large enough sample set, there's going to be lots of videos of Teslas doing these same things too. And like, you'll always be able to point out like the single worst thing that, any vehicle fleet does at a large enough scale, and it's going to look bad. So like, I'm fine kind of saying that they work safely and, have a couple weird issues that Tesla might have as well. But to me, the bigger thing is like the business model just doesn't make any sense. Like they don't have a generalized solution. So they're always going to have to invest a lot of like engineering time, as you mentioned, expanding to a new city. Tesla is doing that at first too. So like, I want to like admit that's at least true. Like Tesla's been seriously overfitting for Austin with their launch. I think that's prudent to do when you go 0 to 1. But what Tesla has is a generalized model that's going to expand everywhere. Waymo just like they can't. like Waymo is the technology leader right now, but like I think the curves are going to be kind of like, I don't know, I can't really do this the way I want to, but like, you know, Waymo is going to kind of go somewhat linear like this, and then like Tesla is just going to go like completely asymptotic, because their approach generalizes everywhere, and eventually they're just going to get rid of these geofences because they don't make any sense. And then like the biggest knock is that these rides aren't profitable. Like maybe they are slightly on the gross margin level, but like it reminds me of that like super overused joke. It's like, oh, we're gonna, you know, we lose money on every sale, but we make up for it on volume. Like that seems to be Waymo's approach. So like the business model doesn't make sense. And even if like let's just say magically like they've got a similar scale to Tesla and they've expanded nationally and like figured out all these problems, then it comes down to the efficiency of the vehicles on a dollar per mile basis, and including depreciation, which means the upfront cost. And Waymo has no chance of competing with Tesla on that metric. So like in the short run, they've got the lead. In the medium run, I think they are not in a good position. And in the long run, it's very obvious to me that they lose. So yeah, I don't know. It's good that they've got deep pockets from Google, because I think this business model just makes zero sense.
So I'll give you a pro tip. When you're charting on the screen, you want to use your right arm. So you want to go this or this.
You know, I think I'm not used to this. It's like a portrait thing I got too, because when we're in client meetings, my screen's usually much more landscape. But anyways, maybe I'll just stop trying to do charting on live stream, because like none of it. Waymo's like this, and then Tesla's going to do this, and then
here's a cover. This is what a cover call looks like.
My apologies to all the viewers who had to endure that.
Yeah. So I think that's a good question here. You know, given the shift in politics, is there a chance that Tesla doesn't get the regulations changed on autonomy? There's the federal motor vehicle safety standards, where if you have a fully autonomous vehicle, even if it's fully autonomous, it needs to have a steering wheel and pedals, and you can only have up to 2,500 vehicles that don't meet those standards. You can apply to NHTSA or something like that for an exemption, but it only goes up to 2,500. So they're needing the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, and Congress is working on a bill right now to give him authority to, you know, raise these limits or remove the limits and work on a federal standard. Is there a risk now that Elon's getting a little salty that they don't come through on these federal standards?
So I don't think so, and we should probably go into those federal standards at some point too, because I was digging into that a little bit today at your request, and like there's all sorts of I think ways out of that 2,500 vehicle, you know, per year limit. Like Tesla needs to basically convince NHTSA that its non-compliant design is at least as safe as a compliant vehicle. So essentially, as I understand that, it's like if they've got the data to prove it, they can at least petition NHTSA to get an exemption to that. But like honestly, I feel like a little bit of the commentary of Elon criticizing the Republicans is a bit overblown. Like I don't think the state of politics is so petty that like all of a sudden Sean Duffy, who was at, you know, Giga Austin last week, was going to be like, no robotaxis, Elon is bad because he was like said mean things about my colleagues. Like I don't see it panning out that way. You know, I think Elon and Trump are still largely aligned. I think Trump probably wants to reduce the deficit and probably isn't a huge fan of all the stuff that got put into the big beautiful bill. But like the tax cuts were his priority, and those are in there. So to me, it's like I don't actually think there's a whole lot of this political backlash. Like now, like Tesla's going to become totally alienated with, you know, Republicans and Democrats hating Elon and Tesla, and like massive like regulatory roadblocks from here. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Okay.
So let's keep it on Tesla for a little bit, but maybe in the context of SpaceX. So Elon gave a presentation on his plans for Mars on SpaceX. Did you happen to see that video on Sunday? I think it was that it dropped.
Yeah, I did watch that fully.
So it was
a really good video.
It was really good. There was a little nugget Elon dropped when he was talking about Tesla's production capacity and like, well, how many vehicles they're selling essentially. And what he was doing was like comparing it to what comparing the SpaceX Starship production ramp, which sounds crazy, like 1,000 ships per year. Really showing like, okay, compared to Tesla, which is doing 1.7 million, it's actually like not very large at all. But maybe we can play that clip just to kind of tee up this point I wanted to make.
Small compared to Tesla. So, and Tesla will probably be doing double, triple that volume in the future.
So this was just a little comment Elon made that I didn't see anybody really commenting on. But we're doing, I can't even see what that is. Is it 1.8 million units a year? 1.7. Yeah. So he's saying we'll do double or triple that, in the future, which, I mean, let's rewind 5 years ago. We were talking about doing 20 million units a year. Now, all of a sudden we're talking about, like 4 or 5 million vehicles potentially in the future. So is this, is that the limit? What do you think? And how disappointing is that when, I remember feeling pretty good like 5 years ago, because when Elon was saying 20 million units by 2030, in my model, I only had 12 million. I was like, I'm being a good boy. I'm being conservative. And like, I had to say, I thought that was like a very achievable milestone. From where we sit now, even with like robotaxis, and even if I think robotaxi is extremely successful, it does seem like it'd be a victory to get half of the 12 million that I was originally going for, which is, less than a third of Elon's original target. So is this disappointing to you?
It is, yeah. And maybe it doesn't matter as much mathematically, but we were talking earlier today. I think one thing you can count on is Tesla may not advertise. Even when they get the Robotaxi network going, I think that's one risk, is they may not advertise to goose their growth. I think people need to understand how good the product is. Like, once you own a Tesla, you see how good it is, but literally no other people know how good it is in comparison to gas guzzlers. So I think that's part of the problem. But I do think, if a lot of the Teslas are going to be robotaxis, then it may not matter if they don't make as many, if they don't make like 12 million a year. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, so we were talking a bit about this earlier today too, when we were chatting offline. But I think I made the case that it actually doesn't matter, because like you have to model out the economics of the robotaxi model. And so even at, we were looking at 1 million vehicles by 2027 was kind of the numbers we were playing with today in our model.
In the robotaxi network.
In the robotaxi fleet. Yeah, it's not annual production. But then annual production of sub 4 million. So kind of in line with what Elon was talking about. And the earnings per share numbers, at that level were more than enough without any, with the multiple coming down, the PE multiple coming down, and really no upside given to Optimus to justify the stock going to 600 in that time frame. This is not financial advice. This is just kind of a sensitivity analysis that we were kind of playing around with in the model. But I think that the point being, the economics of robotaxi are worth a multiple of the economics of just selling a car. So even though like the volumes are massively down from where the bulls were predicting they would be. I mean, I think I remember Warren was even saying like 20 million's too low, like they'll do 30 million or something like that. Like, people had crazy expectations back in 2020. So even though the sober expectations for right now are a very meaningful drop from what we were expecting back then, there still is very significant upside in the stock just based on robotaxi. Then you got Optimus, which is a whole other thing we could get into in all the upside that's there. So I forget exactly what I said when we were talking earlier, but I was like, I feel a bit like I don't know, some Uber bull. She's like, volumes don't matter, bro. Like, it'll be fine. Well, like, AI is going to solve it. Like, it does feel like I feel a little uncomfortable with myself for even saying that, but I do believe it's logically true that the volumes matter much less than kind of the ramp rate of robotaxis.
And maybe we should do a video on this. So we were doing some math, and what we found is that in order to potentially match the number of miles that Uber is doing in a year, you need 411,000 Tesla robotaxis operating, basically, most hours of the day, doing about 300 miles a day, and 200 of those miles being billable. So essentially, you could match Uber's total addressable market with 411,000 Tesla robotaxis, which is interesting, and then like exceed them with more than that. And that seems like a bit extreme to say, well, Tesla's just going to have 1 million of these next year. We think Elon, he's typically early on his predictions, so maybe it happens in 2027, especially late 2027. Guessing it's going to be under 250,000 next year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I could see by year end, I could actually see it being, 400,000 or 500,000, but I'm not sure I would bank on that. But I think there's a very realistic scenario where, they have the safety stats to prove that it's basically significantly safer than driving a human. And like, that's been the most important thing forever, is like, when do you get to the point where it's demonstrably safer than me driving? Like, I can be completely checked out doing something else completely, and it's better than if I was at the wheel. That's been a milestone that is like the single most important milestone. I think they've got a level of comfort that they are there, or that they will be there very soon. And if that's the case and you can demonstrate it, I do think the approvals for wide release will be there. So huge amount of uncertainty, I think, in the next 12 months of like, do they actually have the data, or are we just, thinking they will? Are the regulators kind of cooperative? Do we get some sort of national framework? And then just how aggressive does Tesla want to be in rolling this out? Another point I made when you and I were talking offline earlier was Elon seems to be of the mindset that if this actually is safer than a human driving, then it's actually morally irresponsible to roll it out slowly. Like, because you will actually cost lives by having more people drive their cars than if you had gone with a more aggressive FSD rollout or robotaxi rollout. So I think he will actually believe that it is morally imperative to go as aggressively as possible once the safety stats bear out that it's safer than a human.
So Matt, is it potentially accident causing if Tesla's driving on the wrong side of the road, if there's no other cars on the other side of the road?
Well, I'm curious why you're asking this question, but there are all sorts of things that in a white box you could say are potentially accident causing. And I think you have to get away from the hypothetical and go towards in this particular situation that we're actually talking about, did the car do something that potentially would have caused an accident given the traffic around? Because so many of the criticisms I see are like, oh, like Tesla running a red light is like, that's a safety critical intervention. I'm like, generally I agree with you. Tesla should not be running red lights, but I've never seen it do it once where they're like, it would have caused an accident. So that's like where I think the definitions are like what we're calling safety critical is really important.
So, and I think a great test of this is JC Christopher on X. And if our great producer can flash up his handle after finding it, he's done 15,000 miles driving Uber in Houston. So, basically throwing all kinds of situations at it. Lots of gentlemen's clubs late at night, other things like that, where it's pretty random. So like it's going all over town, and you're throwing lots of situations at it, and he's having the car drive from pickup to drop off, and from drop off to the next pickup. So it's done that without potentially getting him in an accident. And he said he's not had any safety critical, but there's been times where he's taken over just for some navigation things because it was doing a navigation wrong.
Yeah, and I think that corresponds with our experience on V13 also. I've never had a FSD on version 13 do something that was about to cause an accident. But I have taken over for just comfort or convenience, or especially on navigation issues.
Mhm.
So I would expect that they'll continue to work on those things. But like Uber or not Uber, Waymo, like already will do this thing where it will like make 3 right turns in order to avoid a left, which is like you could call that a navigation issue. But it's basically like doing suboptimal route planning, just probably to avoid complicated situations. And you know, if Tesla, like if JC wasn't in there to take over and like, you know, get the faster experience, and the rider wasn't paying attention, there wouldn't be an accident, and it would take a couple minutes extra longer to get to your destination, depending on the severity of the navigation issue. And like, it wouldn't really be that big of a deal. So I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of hand wringing over things that aren't actually the core problem, to me.
Yeah. And yeah, different rules for like backseat driving versus how you would actually drive it, like the ultra critical backseat driver versus like how you would do it. Now I know there's a lot of perfect drivers out there. Everyone thinks they're the best driver, but not sure if that's true. Did we have another exhibit we wanted to show, Matt?
I didn't think so, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk about sales though in general. So
Okay.
we got some good news out of Australia. Not that and that market really matters all that much, but you can see like a really big spike in Model Y deliveries. And I was actually kind of wondering if that might have been some of the weak China registrations that we saw earlier this month, because maybe they were doing exports a little different timing than they normally would. But very, very strong rebound there. In contrast, Europe still looking very weak, despite having some apparent inventory in Model Y. U.S. sales seem to be a bit weak. Troy Tesla's numbers coming in well below 400,000. So another pretty weak quarter. So what do you make of this? We already said pretty soon these quarterly delivery numbers won't matter in the era of Robotaxi, but still not a good sign. And I think we still are in the era where it does matter.
Yeah, I do think it's troubling. If you would have asked me before the quarter started, I would have thought for sure there'd be 400,000 deliveries. That as the new Model Y continue to ramp, it's so good they're going to sell a ton of them, and it seems like there's a significant struggle bus going on in Europe. There probably, I'm guessing there is some brand damage in Europe. We'll see what happens. Maybe there is some supply issue that Tesla isn't talking about with the Model Y. Maybe there's some supply constraints, so that could be where we're wrong. But it is a little surprising, like given how good the new Model Y is, that not more of them are selling, and they're having to continue to do incentives. But the 1.99% APR does expire on June 14th. So I'm wondering what happens on June 15th, Matt.
0.99%.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like people are probably sick of us talking about how ridiculous it is that Tesla doesn't advertise, but it is kind of ridiculous. Like this is such an amazing car, and nobody knows about it. Like people have all these misconceptions in their head about like the fire risk of Teslas, the safety of Teslas, the charging inconvenience, running out of range, like all this stuff that is just like total nonsense. But it's a very real roadblock to people considering a Tesla. So I just wish Tesla would take it a bit more seriously and try to educate people on this, because earnings aside, it's consistent with their mission of accelerating the advent of sustainable energy in transport. If they're underutilizing their existing capacity, then you're no longer accelerating, and in fact you're decelerating slightly if your sales decline year over year. So I'm pretty frustrated by this situation. I wish they would take this a bit more seriously than they have.
I guess where I would disagree slightly is I think it would make sense for Tesla to make 100,000 Model Ys, spend about $3 billion, and use them to deploy in their own fleet. And in that way, they keep all the profits from those vehicles. And they can easily take the money from cash. So they have, I don't know, 38 billion in cash. So they can take 3 billion without compromising anything during the quarter. What do you think about that idea, Matt?
Well, I think they will do that when the time is right. But that's good. Like, you can't just start cranking out output right now and have, like 50,000 Model Ys on a lot somewhere, waiting for Tesla to get Robotaxi approval in Tempe. Like, so I do think that's going to be a nice flexibility kind of thing for their plants, to say, okay, let's just keep the plants running at full capacity. We'll sell as many as we can, and anything left over, we'll drop into the Robotaxi fleet. I think eventually Tesla gets there, but like it would be somewhat crazy, I think, for them to start pumping up production right now and doing, let's just say running at a 2.5 million unit run rate globally, because they think they'll get some approval and they can own a bunch of Model Ys themselves. I don't think that's a prudent use of capital right now, but I think 12,
they could
12 months from now it might be.
In Texas, I think they could do 50,000, and they are road legal in Texas. They do have the steering wheels and pedals. I think they could easily do 50,000 in Florida, where it's legal, and very similar to Texas and their regulations. And they don't need to do anything special for the federal motor vehicle safety standards, because they do have the wheel and the pedals.
So would you support them actually doing that right now? Just like max out the plants, run flat out? Are you actually advocating that?
That they do it, and so they're ready to deploy in Texas. And I think they should, as soon as they know what's required to run the fleet internally. How much people and how much charging. So like once they get that information, and also see, okay, what issues do they have with pickup or drop off, and what issues are there with like running the fleet from like a remote reset standpoint, where they may need to back some cars up if they go down a closed road or something like that. So I think if they get more information, they should do that. But this moment, I would say no. But in a couple months, I'd support it.
Sorry, I got this new computer and I'm not logged in any of my things anymore. So I'm trying to send Jordan a message about a comment I wanted to bring up, because I can't bring it up right now. Okay. Maybe one other question. Actually, let's just bring this comment. Do you see it? It's at 431. There we go. Do you think Elon's negative tweets may indicate a slight delay in FSD? I don't think he would care about tax credits if FSD was about to go big. I'm curious your thought. I've got an answer here, but I wonder what you think about that, Bradford.
I haven't thought about that yet, so I got to grok that for a bit. Can you put that up on the screen?
I'll give my answer, and then maybe you can respond. Yeah. So, I think he's just upset about this, pork barrel spending, and like how I think he feels pretty betrayed by the Republicans after all he did for them, all he spent, like out there, not only spending money and writing checks, but like literally living in Pennsylvania for like a month plus to help secure Trump's victory. and I think he's just upset at how petty that this has been. We've heard this June 12th date. They've been reiterating June for a very long time. I mean, if it doesn't get delayed like a week, I don't think that's actually a big deal. I think as long as they actually launch in June, it's good, and I'd be absolutely shocked if that didn't happen. So honestly, I think him being very negative about this is more about feeling kind of betrayed politically than about like FSD being delayed and the numbers aren't where they he'd like them to be.
Where my mind goes with this question is, and I could be this way too, is Elon's very driven by right and wrong, and I think fairness. And I think he thinks it's unfair that clean energy and EVs are getting dumped on, whereas your fossil fuels aren't getting dropped too. So I think that's also a part of it.
Yeah, I do think that's the case. So let me get the other. There was one other thing I wanted to throw up here. Sorry, I'm not as organized as I wanted to be today. Yeah, so maybe the other question I wanted to run by you: are you in my camp yet on Cybertruck being a commercial flop? Are we getting there?
I don't have enough information yet. I don't think they've started delivering the $70,000 Cybertruck. So I'm curious what production and demand for that are like once they start pushing that out the door. I think maybe there's some parts shortage or supply issues.
Yeah. So I do think it's a commercial flop, but I think it's probably still a good investment anyways, because they've developed a lot of new technologies that will be useful.
Good investment for Tesla.
For Tesla, yeah. In terms of getting the 48-volt architecture, steer by wire, I think is a super important one. I was actually kind of laughing earlier because it's like, for safety, you want to have a steering wheel and pedals, but actually in a robotaxi that's pretty dangerous, because the user could nudge the steering wheel or actively push it and cause an accident. Whereas if you just disconnect that and have no steering wheel, then there's no chance for either an inadvertent or deliberate kind of change of the vehicle's trajectory. So
and with the Cybertruck, you can.
With the Cybertruck, you can actually delete the steering wheel, but with the the Model Y, you cannot. Maybe you could get rid of the actual wheel itself and like have the axle be on put like a little nub on there so people can't actually hit it or something. Maybe there's something you could do to make it a little bit more customer friendly. But I think it's definitely a good investment that they've made in the technology. But yeah, disappointing, I think, from the numbers. So I think the tone's been a bit negative, I would say, today. We've been a bit downers on some of this stuff, but we did also say $600 at the end of 2027. So how do you put this together? We've got this mix of short-term, bad or at least not good news, coupled with, literally weeks away, or like a week and a half away from Robotaxi launch. Lots going to depend on the pace of that. But then probably a couple weeks after that, we'll have a pretty disappointing, production and delivery report and maybe a weak earnings report. So how do you kind of carry in your own mind the short-term weakness with our medium-term and long-term optimism?
So tell me what you mean by the $600 thing. Is that just from Robotaxi profits?
Oh yeah. So when you and I were looking at some numbers earlier today, we were kind of looking at like the Q4 earnings per share annualized. I think it was let me see if I got my math right. Yeah, so it was 12. I think it was $3 in earnings per share. It's a little bit north of there in that one quarter. And so then if you just annualize that, that's $12 annually. So if you apply just a 50 multiple to that, it's $600 fair value of the stock at that point. So that's getting
from Robotaxi without licensing.
Well, it's Robotaxi without licensing, but it was the entire business. So it also includes like the ramp up of Megapack. It also
Okay.
includes like FSD sales, and there's a lot of those because it was assumed to be 100% attach rate on the cyber caps, which I think were 300,000 per quarter. So a lot of assumptions, which might seem aggressive compared to where we are today, but which I think are actually very reasonable when you look at the Robotaxi kind of future that it's envisioning. We looked at a declining, cost per mile, price per mile, and putting that all together, it was, $3 in earnings per quarter. So $12 annually, with lots of future growth prospects. I mean, you could imagine at that point, 2 years from now, where Optimus is going to be. Like they're actually going to have some, like there's actually zero Optimus earnings in that number. And so maybe you justify a higher PE multiple even because Optimus is going to be ramping at that point. So that's where the 600 came from.
Okay. Yep. Brian reminds me we will be at the Michigan Tesla Owners Club Michigan summer meetup in Muskegon. Muskegon.
If you like Elon and you like Ghostbusters, It's a great one to go to.
So we'll be speakers there. We'll be hanging out all day. You can come meet us, chat with us. Be good to see a lot of folks there. I'll have to remember bring my sunscreen.
And your wallet. You forgot your wallet last year.
I did. Yeah. Somehow I survived. So yeah, our tone has been negative today, a bit negative or glum for sure. But I will say we're incredibly excited for the future that Tesla's bringing. We do run diversified portfolios in addition to the crazy stuff we do at rebellionaire.com. And Tesla is our number one position in our diversified portfolios. And that wouldn't be the case if we were down on the future prospects of Tesla. So we're incredibly excited about what they're going to do with autonomy. Autonomy is the primary reason we own Tesla. But then after that, we may have some upside optionality from the Optimus, the humanoid robot, and employing that in factories and in homes and other places. So we're incredibly excited by what Tesla is doing with real world AI that's going to save lives. I'm hopeful in some future date that maybe we cut road deaths in the US by 90%. So that would mean that 35,000 people per year would be saved from road deaths. And maybe if we're just getting rid of some of those accidents too, it would be 300,000 people who are seriously injured, where they are not killed. They are saved by medics or whatever, but they are seriously injured in a debilitating way, where they're maimed or their bodies are a bit broken, but they survive from it. I think that would be huge for society. So this is a passion thing for me, but I do think the economics are there as an investment. It's going to be transformative for transportation over time.
So maybe we are in the camp that short-term deliveries don't matter.
Maybe.
I think that is kind of the camp I find myself in, honestly, because like I model it. I want to be extremely neutral about it. Like, we're not the Uber bulls, and we're also not, bears, or even like a lot of the more, I think, nuanced bulls in the past, I think are overweighting how important deliveries are right now. I won't name names here, but I've just seen a lot of posts from people who I respect that, like, I'm like, I feel like you're missing the big picture, like how disruptive this technology is going to be.
I think they're just skeptical on how good version 13 already is.
I think if you don't drive it, that's a serious disadvantage to your understanding of what's happening. I think that's very true.
So Brian, if you're still watching, do you think we're at least 10 times better than the community tracker as far as safety on version 13? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'll put them up there. Matt, what are your thoughts about Optimus? I mentioned Optimus.
I'm optimistic. That was bad. No, I think it's we spoke about this maybe a month ago, but it's progressing way faster than I thought it would. And like the hardware, I kind of care about, but I also like don't because what really matters to make like an economically useful robot is the brains. And they seem to have made a pretty big breakthrough. I think with the dancing in particular. I mean, that was I think most that was actually equally impressive on both the hardware and the software side because I did not think any version of the robot would be that kind of dexterous and responsive to be able to like make moves so elegant. So that was I think very impressive. And but the more important thing I think is what they've done with sim to real, where you basically show a very limited sample set of like what you want the robot to learn how to do, and it can do that. Now I think the videos that they shared, what was really impressive was that there were so many different tasks that they got the robot trained on in a very short amount of time. What was not impressive was the quality of those tasks. So like, it was like stirring a pot and it was like moving the pot and, like Tesla Boomer Mama went crazy about like how it wasn't ironing the right way. So like I would say it's not economically useful with the current capability that it has in any one of those skill sets. But it seems like what's most important is what is the rate of improvement for learning new things and doing them well. And that flywheel is progressing a lot faster than I thought it would. So the very long-winded way of saying I'm extremely optimistic that when we do get to the 2027 timeframe, not only will they be selling a meaningful quantity of these, but I think people will realize that like it's underhyped, if anything, and the excitement about how big this opportunity is, I think will be a lot higher then, because you'll be able to actually see these robots in factories or in other places of work doing useful work. We'll have some real stats on the economics of them. And I think that's going to, like in the very long term, I think that's going to be a much bigger driver of the stock.
So maybe we're a little optimistic about the timeline, but think about Tesla potentially surpassing Uber in a couple of years after Uber has been at it for, has it been over a decade yet?
I think maybe so. I'm pretty sure I was using it like in early 2010s.
So maybe they surpass Uber in a couple of years, but maybe that's a little optimistic. But then as that's coming online, then you have Optimus coming online too, where Optimus is beginning to be mass produced and maybe sold to other manufacturers. Maybe Tesla is done deploying Optimus to their factories and selling it to their suppliers, and now they're selling it to other manufacturers. I think it could be quite exciting.
Yeah. And maybe
Maximus.
Maybe a note to close it on would be, I was on this panel with Dan Ives and a bunch of other, I guess, investors that have like a large following on social media. It was sponsored by Granite Shares, which runs like the double leverage Tesla and Nvidia ETFs. But so like, I made some very bullish comments about Tesla and how their approach made the most sense about like for solving autonomy. And like the consensus of all these other speakers was like, well, I hate to break it to you, but like Waymo's the real leader in this space. Well, I don't drive a Tesla personally, but like they're so far behind, like it's going to be very hard for them to catch up. And it's just so overpriced. So like, this is still a mindset that I think is out there for a huge volume of investors. So like, while we've had this nice rally in the last, month or so, I think the vast majority of the investing public out there, even the quote unquote sophisticated ones who are like following the tech space closely, I think just have no idea like how the technology works, why Tesla has a legitimate competitive advantage in the long run that will make Waymo completely irrelevant. So it just makes me optimistic that we're not like there's still so much misinformation out there. It feels like we defeated a lot of the FUD because it's not like the 2019, 2020 days where like there was just like like total insanity being spewed about. Like we're not at that level anymore. But I think the skepticism from like people who think they're sophisticated, that still does make me optimistic, because I'm like, you actually don't know what you're talking about, and you're here on like a Spaces, like trying to sound like the expert. So that made me feel pretty comfortable, because I feel most comfortable when I really understand someone's argument and it's just like dead wrong, and they've got this confidence about it that is completely misplaced. And I feel like we're somewhat there with Tesla on what's going to happen with autonomy.
So we're not allowed to say we're experts. That's something the SEC doesn't like, or we have to justify it when we use the word expert. But Matt and myself, I think we each have like 5,000 hours into Tesla each. So a lot of time, maybe a lot of it wasted.
I was talking to like the other people on the panel, you know, who like come off as the experts. That's the context in which I was using that word.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting is I think a lot of people avoid Tesla, especially as like a professional investor, because they don't want to have to justify their decision. And Tesla is very controversial. You have Elon Musk, who's very controversial. He's like the opposite of a Tim Cook, where everything is like polished and scripted. And Apple, like everything's perfect, and you know, down to the last like pixel on the icon or whatever, it's just all perfect. And you know,
which by the way makes it feel completely inauthentic.
Using all these big words in their earnings calls, like luxurious, and I don't know what they say. It was like beautiful, evocative. They have all these buzzwords they use in every earnings call. But what I like is so that they use it as a opportunity. Anyways, yeah, Future Raza is an expert. I can say that. Love the amount of effort that Brian Future Raza puts into covering Tesla and traveling for Tesla as well. Looking forward to seeing you, Brian, in Michigan. Give me a big hug. Looking forward to that. And I think with that, we're going to wrap it up.
Well, yeah. And just one last quick plug. If you are interested, check out the, what is the website? It's teslamichigan.org/summer meetup, or just go to the teslamichigan.org website. They're still selling tickets, so highly encourage you all to go check it out. We'll be there. Brian's going to be there. We'll be on a panel with Larry also, Larry Goldberg. So be lots of great conversation there, and it's great to support the cause. I think that's actually not the right. I think there's a dash in the summer dash meetup.
Oh, okay.
So.
And is Michigander correct?
Michigander. That is the demonym. Yeah, for people who live in Michigan.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that,
I'm Bradford Ferguson, and we're with rebellionaire.com. Check us out. We've revamped our website. So share a little more on the website now. It's pretty simple, easy to navigate. And
we've made it beautiful. We've introduced a new color palette with shocking display of color, pixels. Trying to do my best, Tim Cook, there, but I don't. My thesaurus is not as advanced.
With that, I'm going to say bye for now.
Bye for now.